It was a late evening, the kind of night when most people had already gone home. The big office building stood almost empty, its long glass windows reflecting the quiet city lights. Inside, the CEO was still at work, finishing some urgent files. He was tired, but determined to get everything done before leaving. Finally, after hours of staring at papers and screens, he decided it was time to head home. The hallways were silent, his footsteps echoing faintly as he walked toward the exit. When he pushed open the main door and stepped outside, the cool night air touched his face. As he walked across the parking lot, something caught his eye. A small flicker of light shone from the corner, near the security guard's booth. At first, he thought it was just a phone or maybe a lamp, but the way the light moved made him curious. He slowed down his steps, trying not to make noise. There, in the dim glow of a flashlight, the security guard was sitting with a book in his hands. His uniform looked a little worn out, and his posture showed how long he had been on duty. But despite the long shift, his eyes were focused on the pages, reading carefully as if every word mattered. The CEO stopped for a moment. It was unusual to see someone studying so late, especially a guard who already worked such tiring hours. The building was quiet, the city seemed asleep, and yet here was this man, pushing himself to learn in the little time he had. The CEO did not say anything. He just stood there, hidden in the shadows, watching silently. The guard did not even notice anyone was near. He was lost in his book, holding the flashlight close so that the words were clear. Sometimes he underlined something with a pen. Sometimes he nodded slightly, as if he had understood an important point. The sight touched the CEO in a way he could not explain. He had seen many employees in his life, met countless professionals, and attended big meetings with highly educated people. But there was something different about this moment. Here was a man who had almost nothing, sitting under the dim light of a flashlight, trying to build a better future for himself. For a brief second, the CEO thought of walking over and asking him what he was studying. But then he stopped. He did not want to embarrass him or make him uncomfortable. So instead, he quietly walked past, opened his car, and drove away. But even as the car moved through the streets, his mind stayed with the guard. That image, a man in uniform, bent over a book in the stillness of the night, refused to leave him. He wondered what kind of life the guard must be living. Why was he studying so late? What dream was he chasing? What struggle pushed him to work long hours and still open his books when the world was asleep? The CEO reached home, but the thoughts followed him. He poured himself a glass of water, sat on the couch, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a quiet sense of respect for someone he barely knew. He had seen ambition in boardrooms, but this was something deeper. This was survival, determination, and hope all mixed together. That night, he lay awake for a while, replaying the scene in his head, the flickering flashlight, the tired face, the steady eyes refusing to give up. He did not know it yet, but this simple sight would soon change not just the guard's life, but also his own. The next morning, the CEO sat in his office, but his mind was not fully on the work in front of him. The memory of the security guard studying with that small flashlight kept returning, almost like a scene from a movie that wouldn't stop playing in his head. He had spent years running a successful company, meeting clients, dealing with profits, and leading big teams. But somehow, the sight of that guard, alone at night, with nothing but a book and determination, seemed more powerful than anything he had seen in the boardroom. By afternoon, he found himself staring out the window, wondering more about the man he had seen. What was his story? Why did he choose to study after such a long day? Did he have a family depending on him? Or was he chasing a dream that nobody else believed in? The CEO knew he could not just ignore it. His curiosity had turned into a quiet concern. That evening, he decided to stay back again, though he had already finished his work. He wanted to see if the guard would be there, doing the same thing. Hours passed, and finally, the building grew quiet. As the CEO stepped outside, he looked toward the booth once more. And there it was again, the small circle of light, the same bent posture, the same tired but determined face. The guard was reading with full focus, not even noticing the world around him. This time, The CEO lingered a little longer. He didn't want to disturb him, so he stayed hidden behind a pillar, simply observing. The guard's hands turned the pages slowly, sometimes pausing as though he was memorizing something important. He looked exhausted, yet his eyes carried a kind of fire that only comes from someone who refuses to give up. The CEO went home again, but now the questions in his heart grew louder. He wanted to know the truth. He wanted to know why this man was sacrificing sleep just to study by flashlight. The next day, instead of calling the guard directly, he quietly asked someone from HR if they knew more about him. He did not mention the late-night studying. He just asked casually, as though he was curious about the staff in general. That's when he learned a piece of the story. The guard was not just working to support himself. He was the main provider for his family. He had younger siblings at home and aging parents who depended on his income. But despite the long hours, he had enrolled in evening classes. His dream was to complete his education and one day work in a professional field, where he could give his family a better life. The CEO sat back in his chair, listening quietly as the HR manager explained. The guard's salary was modest, and most of it went toward rent, food, and bills. What little remained, he used to buy second-hand books and pay for part of his tuition. Since he could not afford extra lighting at home and didn't want to disturb his family late at night, he often chose to study during his break hours in the booth, using his own flashlight. Hearing this, the CEO felt something stir inside him. He had read many success stories in newspapers and seen young talents rise in his company, but this was different. This was raw determination. It was a kind of story that often remains hidden, unnoticed by the world. That evening, when he left the office again, he looked at the booth with different eyes. Now, he didn't just see a guard with a book. He saw a man carrying responsibilities, quietly fighting against circumstances, refusing to let poverty decide his future. For the first time, the CEO felt he wanted to do something more than just watch. He wanted to speak to him. He wanted to hear his story in the guard's own words. As he walked toward his car, he decided, tomorrow night, he would not just pass by. He would stop. The following night, the CEO stayed back in the office again. He worked for a while, but his real purpose was clear to him. When the building grew quiet and most of the staff had gone, he stepped outside, his eyes immediately searching for the familiar glow of the flashlight. Sure enough, there it was again. The small circle of light, steady in the darkness, falling on the open pages of a book. The guard was there, sitting just as he had been the previous nights, shoulders slightly bent, lips moving silently as he read. The CEO took a deep breath, and this time, instead of walking past, he made his way toward the booth. His footsteps echoed on the pavement, and the guard quickly straightened up, almost startled. He snapped the book shut and adjusted his flashlight, embarrassed that someone had caught him. "Good evening," the CEO said gently, giving a small smile. The guard stood up quickly, his hand brushing his uniform nervously. "Good evening, sir." His voice was respectful, but his eyes showed a hint of worry, as if he had been caught doing something wrong. The CEO paused for a moment before speaking again. "I noticed you were reading," he said softly. "What are you studying so late at night?" For a second, the guard hesitated. He looked down at the book in his hand, then back at the CEO. Just some notes, sir. For my classes." His tone was humble, almost apologetic. The CEO's curiosity deepened. "Classes? You mean you're studying while working here?" The guard nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. I'm trying to finish my degree. It's not easy with the shifts, but I try to use the quiet hours at night." His words were simple, but they carried a quiet strength. The CEO studied his face. He could see the tiredness in his eyes, the marks of long nights and heavy responsibilities. Yet there was also something else, a determination that refused to fade. "Doesn't it exhaust you?" the CEO asked. "Working all day and then studying like this?" The guard gave a small smile, almost shy. "It does, sir. But I don't have much choice. My family depends on me. I can't stop working. And I can't stop studying either. If I want a better future, I have to keep going, no matter how hard it is." For a moment, silence hung between them. The CEO felt something stir deep inside him, admiration, respect, and a quiet sadness. Here was a man who had so little, yet carried so much strength. "What do you want to do after your studies?" the CEO finally asked. The guard's eyes lit up slightly, as if someone had touched his deepest dream. "I want to work in a proper office, sir. Maybe in accounting or as an assistant. Something where I can use my education. I don't want to spend my whole life just standing at a gate. I want to give my family a better life. I want them to be proud." The CEO nodded slowly, his heart heavy yet inspired. He had met many young professionals who had every opportunity handed to them, yet they never showed this kind of fire. But here was a man working the hardest job with the lowest pay, still clinging to his dream with everything he had. "I admire your determination," the CEO said sincerely. "Not everyone would do what you are doing. It takes courage." The guard looked down, his face slightly flushed. "Thank you, sir. I just hope one day it will be worth it." The CEO left that night with a strange feeling in his chest. It was no longer just curiosity. It was personal now. He had heard the guard's voice, seen his hope, and felt his struggle. He knew this was not just a passing story. Something inside him told him he had to be part of it. The next day at work, the CEO found himself distracted. Every meeting, every phone call, every discussion with his managers seemed to fade quickly from his mind. What stayed with him was the quiet conversation he had with the guard the night before. He couldn't shake off the words, "I don't want to spend my whole life just standing at a gate." The CEO kept replaying that sentence in his head. He thought about the way the guard's eyes had shined when he spoke about his dream, and how quickly they had softened again when he mentioned his struggles. By late afternoon, the CEO made up his mind. He couldn't just admire the guard's determination from afar. He wanted to do something about it. That evening, instead of leaving straight away, he walked down to the booth again. The guard stood up quickly, surprised to see him 2 nights in a row. "Good evening, sir," the guard greeted, this time with a little smile, though still a bit nervous. "Good evening," the CEO replied warmly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, sir," the guard said. He held the book in his hand but didn't open it, waiting respectfully. The CEO leaned slightly against the booth, trying to make the conversation easy. "I was thinking about what you told me yesterday," he began. "About your studies. About your dreams." The guard's face turned serious. He nodded quietly but didn't speak. "I want to understand more," the CEO continued. "How do you manage everything? Working long shifts, supporting your family, and still studying?" The guard hesitated for a moment, then spoke honestly. "It's not easy, sir. I sleep only a few hours, but I tell myself it's worth it. My father is sick, my younger siblings are still in school. If I give up, then everything falls apart. Sometimes I feel tired, but then I remember why I started. I want to break this cycle. I want a different life for them." The CEO listened silently, his heart heavier with each word. He realized this wasn't just a man studying for personal gain. This was someone carrying the weight of an entire family on his shoulders. After a long pause, the CEO spoke gently. "You know, not everyone has the courage to do what you're doing. Most people give up when life is too hard. But you're still fighting." The guard gave a faint smile, his eyes lowering. "Sometimes, sir, I feel like I'm fighting alone." Those words pierced the CEO deeply. He stood there for a moment, his mind already racing. He knew he had the power to change this man's situation. He knew he could open doors that were otherwise closed to him. Finally, he said, "What if you didn't have to fight alone?" The guard looked up, confused. "Sir." The CEO smiled softly. "I can't promise everything, but I believe in people who work hard. And you've shown me something rare. Let's just say, I'd like to help you." The guard blinked, clearly stunned. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. His eyes shimmered with a mix of disbelief and hope. "Tomorrow," the CEO continued, "come see me in my office after your shift. We'll talk about possibilities." The guard finally managed to speak, his voice trembling. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything now," the CEO said gently. "Just don't give up on your dream. Let's see what we can do together." That night, As the CEO walked back to his car, he felt a sense of peace. For the first time, he knew he wasn't just an observer in this story. He was about to become a part of it. And for the guard, that night was different from all others. For the first time in years, as he held his book and flashlight, he felt he wasn't entirely alone in the fight anymore. The next morning, the guard finished his shift as usual. His eyes were heavy from the long night, but his heart carried a nervous excitement. He could hardly believe what had happened. The CEO himself had spoken to him and had asked him to come to his office. When his shift ended, he went home quickly, washed up, changed into his cleanest clothes, and returned to the office building. He felt nervous walking into the grand lobby, surrounded by polished floors and tall glass walls. This was the same building he guarded every night, but today he was walking in not as a security guard, but as someone the CEO had personally called for. An assistant guided him to the top floor. His palms were sweaty, his steps unsure, but he kept reminding himself of the CEO's words, "Don't give up on your dream. Let's see what we can do together." When he entered the office, the CEO welcomed him warmly. "Come in, sit down," he said, his tone kind and respectful. For the guard, it felt strange. He had always been the one standing, nodding, greeting others as they entered. But today, he was the one being invited to sit. The CEO leaned forward. "I've been thinking about your situation," he began. "I can see how hard you're working. You're not only serving here at night, but also carrying your family's weight and studying on top of it. That's rare dedication." The guard lowered his eyes humbly. "Thank you, sir. I don't know what else to do. I just want a better future." The CEO smiled. "And you deserve one. So here's what I've decided. From today, the company will cover your education fees. You'll also have more flexible shifts, so you don't have to study only at night with a flashlight. You'll get time to rest and prepare properly." The guard froze. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. For a moment he simply stared, his heart racing, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Sir, you mean you'll pay for my studies?" he whispered, almost afraid to believe it. "Yes," the CEO replied firmly. "I believe in investing in people who don't give up. And you've shown me that you have the spirit to go far. You shouldn't be struggling alone. Let us help you." Tears welled up in the guard's eyes. He quickly looked down, his hands shaking slightly. All the nights of exhaustion, all the silent battles, all the weight of responsibility. It suddenly felt lighter. "Sir, I don't have words." His voice broke, and he wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed. The CEO leaned back, his voice steady but warm. "You don't need to thank me. Just promise me one thing, that you'll give your best not just for yourself, but for everyone who believes in you." The guard nodded, his voice choked with emotion. "I promise, sir. I won't waste this chance. I'll make you proud. I'll make my family proud." The CEO smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. He had signed many contracts, closed many deals, but nothing had ever felt as fulfilling as this. Helping one determined man chase his dream meant more than any profit line. When the guard walked out of that office, his steps were lighter than they had ever been. For the first time in years, he carried not just responsibility, but also hope. He wasn't fighting alone anymore. Someone powerful had stood by him. That day, his life truly began to change. Months passed, and slowly, the change became visible. The guard was no longer just a tired man struggling with a flashlight at night. With his tuition covered and his schedule adjusted, he had time to attend classes properly, study in the daytime, and rest when needed. Every week, he grew more confident. He wasn't just memorizing words in the dark anymore. He was learning, truly learning. His professors noticed his dedication. His classmates admired his discipline. And back home, his family watched in amazement as he balanced work, studies, and family responsibilities without breaking down. One evening, after finishing his shift, he went home to find his younger brother waiting for him with wide eyes. "Brother," he said softly, "when I grow up, I want to study just like you. I want to be strong like you." The guard smiled, tears stinging his eyes. For the first time, he felt his struggles had become something greater than himself. He was setting an example, not only for his family, but for everyone who thought dreams had an expiry date. Time moved forward, and finally, the day came when he held his degree in his hands. He stood in front of the mirror, dressed in graduation robes, unable to stop smiling. His journey had been longer than most, but every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt had led him here. At the ceremony, as he walked across the stage, he spotted the CEO in the audience, clapping with pride. Their eyes met, and in that single moment, no words were needed. They both knew what this day meant. Soon after, the company offered him a position in the office. No longer was he standing outside guarding the gates. He now sat at a desk, working with files, numbers, and decisions, the very future he had once only dreamed about under the dim glow of a flashlight. His colleagues respected him not just for his work, but for his journey. They knew his story, and it inspired them to push harder, to never take opportunities for granted. And the CEO? For him, the entire experience became one of the most meaningful chapters of his life. He had always believed leadership was about running a company, but now he understood it was also about recognizing the silent fighters, the ones who go unnoticed. The guard's transformation spread quietly through the company. Employees began to whisper his story in hallways and cafeterias, telling each other about the man who studied in the dark and how the CEO had helped change his life. It wasn't just a story anymore, it was a lesson. A reminder that determination can survive even in the toughest circumstances, and that sometimes all it needs is one helping hand to turn it into victory. Years later, when people looked back, they didn't just remember him as the guard who once stood outside. They remembered him as the man who never gave up, the man whose persistence earned him a brighter future, and the man who proved that even in the darkest hours, dreams can shine if you keep fighting for them. And for everyone who heard his story, one message remained clear. Success is not always about where you start. Sometimes it's about how much you're willing to fight and who you meet along the way that chooses to believe in you.